All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Proof of Work Works, the most exciting panel of the day at the best time of the day.
That was great energy, man. Yes.
Yeah, it's the right energy. This is one venti iced Americano in me running through my veins. My name is Ben Gagnon. I'm Chief Mining Officer for BitFarms, one of the largest and oldest publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies globally. And we've got a great panel here for you today. I'm going to go ahead and let everybody go ahead and introduce themselves, starting with Ethan.
All right, let's go left to right, I guess. Cool. Thanks for coming out, everyone. I know it's early in the morning here, and everyone probably had a really late night, so I appreciate it. My name's Ethan. I'm the CEO of Luxor Technology, software services company. We started in 2017, and over the past 4.5 years, we've launched over 20 proof-of-work chains. So seeing everything from the Obelisk debacle and Siacoin to things like Monero, and everything in between in proof of work. Today we're mainly focused on Bitcoin mining and Ethereum, but the journey through proof of work has been fascinating, so really excited to discuss it here with these gents.
You're hard to follow. Good morning, everyone. Alex Brammer. I came from about 15 years in the military, and then I joined this man, and he taught me everything he knew about mining about a year and a half ago. Worked at Luxor doing VP of business development things for about a year, and then just recently moved over to Talen Energy, which is one of the North America's largest independent power producers, who is thinking very interesting things about mining and doing some interesting things in the space. I do think this panel is important. Proof of work kind of connects physics back to or plugs us back into the reality of physics at the social layer. Particularly politics and things like energy policy, and yeah, I'm just really excited about the space and excited to be up here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Rafuse. I'm the chairman of Monbanc. It's a mining operation that has facilities in Canada, United States, and Latin America, and honored to speak to you this morning about a very important topic. The proof that proof of work works is that we're all here today, able to pay our ticket for this venue. So we'll be able to make the case this morning very well. Go ahead, the next participant.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Shyshatskyi. I'm a mathematician and I'm chief scientist at Jax.Network. So we have a booth here. So if you are interested in Jax.Network, you are invited to visit us. I'm happy to participate in this discussion, and my opinion is this is the most interesting and the most important panel on this conference. And also, I would like to add that I'm a big opponent of proof of stake, so I believe this discussion will be very interesting.
This is a tough panel to follow. So I'm subbing in. I'm Scot from Digital Shovel. We fabricate and build crypto mining data centers, more on the hardware, electrical, and ventilation side. So I'm going to try to keep up with you guys, but been in it since 2017. Big supporter of proof of stake, and I'm very excited to be on this panel and looking forward to sharing the insights you guys have on it.
Great. All right. So I think we all, are big miners here. We all are interested in mining. One of the things that we as an industry are always facing is this idea that there's an alternative out there. It's frequently read in pretty much any article about Bitcoin mining and its environmental impact that there's a more efficient alternative with proof of stake. Pretty sure we all know that that's not true. It's not a viable alternative, and it's not an appropriate substitute. So I want to start off just with a basic question. What is the opposition to proof of work in the first place? Because we are now 13 years into this new industry that we've created. Every single block has been processed. Every single transaction has been processed. There has been no disruptions to the network. The system obviously works as it was intended. So what is the opposition to proof of work? Maybe Alex, you want to start with that?
It's in opposition to the loss of control. The attack vectors against POW, the arguments against proof of work are couched in terms of environmentalism, of emissions, lack of regulation, investor protection, et cetera, et cetera. But really this is about the investor protection. If they wanted to do that, it would be proof of stake that they would be scrutinizing, which they are, rightly so. Proof of work really, though, is the thing that, because it is truly disintermediating some of the most powerful institutions and people in the world, and it's making their jobs irrelevant, and it's disabling their ability to exert the type of control that they want to control, it is very threatening to them on a variety of levels, and we can talk about that. But I really do think it's a fight against, it's a fight for survival and control.
I would say that those who are against proof of work are the enemies of truth, the enemies of fairness, the enemies of what is transparent. Because what does Bitcoin bring to us? It brings us a public ledger where all transactions can be followed. It also brings us a secure network that can give trust to everyone on all four corners of this planet, that they can trade fairly and not have a central government or a programmer, for that matter, create something that can be frauded. And so I agree that it is a question of people who want control and they want to steal it from those who believe and trust in a central, decentralized network called Bitcoin.
So, Yuri,
So-
I'm gonna. You want to take that, Ethan?
Well, I'll just jump in there. So I think these two guys touched on kind of like the motivations of why people are attacking proof of work. When you look at proof of work in Bitcoin, I think there's really one argument against it right now, which is the energy usage. Pretty much any other argument against proof of work at this point has kind of lost interest in the media. So I think like that energy debate, which I'm sure we'll talk about later today, is probably like the biggest front for proof of work moving forward, at least proof of work in Bitcoin. I think when we talk about proof of work generally, we just default to Bitcoin because it works in Bitcoin. There's many use cases where proof of work lacks some elements of security in some of the other networks. If you look at things like some of the GPU mineable coins, for example, with misalignment incentives, easier attack vectors. But I think for this panel, maybe we'll focus on Bitcoin proof of work. So I'll stay away from that.
I think that's absolutely right. The focus is really on the environmental aspects, but there's two things that are going on here, right? You have the economic aspect with regards to proof of work and implementing and maintaining barriers of entry to just creating money and wealth out of thin air. And you also have the consensus mechanisms and the blockchain part of things. And I think this is where the dividing line is. People look at other consensus methodologies and they say, well, there's other systems that can create blockchains and that can create consensus, and therefore it's a viable alternative. And maybe we can just spend a minute. Yuri, do you want to talk about what's the purpose of a blockchain? What's the purpose of a consensus mechanism separate from the economics?
Yes, that's a very good question. But let's go a level up and tell what is in general the purpose of the blockchain network. And the main purpose of the blockchain network is to solve data immutability problem in such a way that there is no central authority which can affect the data, which can forge it in any way or like substitute the state which is formed like 10 minutes ago with a new state and get any profit of it. And basically it's a way to build a truly trustless solution. And consensus is an important part of it, as well as decentralization. And proof of work is a very, very convenient tool in achieving that. In contrast to that, proof of stake, it may seem like it's consensus, but it's not actually true if you go into details.
I think it's the interesting part here is that there are other ways to build a blockchain, And they're saying that this is, the only thing that really matters is creation of a blockchain. But I think the most important thing about proof of work is that leveling of the playing field and the creation of barriers of entry. And you see that happening all over the world, all over, the globe in various parts. And because you don't need to be connected to, one specific region, you can deploy anywhere. So maybe, Scott, you can talk about how proof of work is being deployed, all over the world thanks to containerized technologies and data centers that are able to take advantage of assets where they exist, on an even playing field.
Yeah, 100%. And what I'd probably like to highlight is the advantages of using proof of work in stranded gas plays and associated gas and flare mitigation and the benefits of that. I guess I'm going off on a tangent off of it being based off proof of work, but having mobile solutions, not pitching our own thing, but like having mobile solutions and being able to launch a data center, literally, like you said, anywhere in the world. We've had you guys put data centers as far north as Northwest Territories in Canada with gas that would have otherwise gone to completely nothing. It's just associated gas that's coming off an oil well, and now that's used to secure and maintain the blockchain and reinforce the proof of work mechanism.
The decentralization of the means of production of money is really interesting, but it's also interesting because really it's just the security mechanism of our monetary system, and that is becoming more and more dispersed. And it's hard to deploy it. Like we talk about here, but it's hard to deploy a container in an austere environment. There's like work that goes into just like setting up the proof of work machines. The same thing at the large scale, at the centralized, like steel in the ground is an enormous barrier to entry to the creation of money. Whereas proof of stake is we're living in a world that is proof of stake by another name, and it's fiat-based central banking, where it is relatively inexpensive to create money. It is relatively inexpensive to manipulate markets. The tools are available to actually manipulate the single most important price signal, which is the price of money, and that all is the Bitcoin network proof of work mitigates that because it requires such an enormous amount of infrastructural work and investment and to then not even be able to alter monetary policy. It's just to secure it, and that is a 0 to 1 moment in human history.
Yeah, I just wanted to say when I started my remarks, I said, the proof that proof of work works is that we're here today. And you said, why did he say that? What does that mean? And I mean, now I didn't know what I was saying, and no, I figured it out. Essentially, what I was this sounded good, but it has to make sense as well, So essentially, the reason why it is true is that everyone in this room and millions of people outside of this room have trust and belief that Bitcoin and other proof of work chains have value and that have been able to support families and businesses and corporations and great public companies like BitFarms and private companies like Luxor and Monbanc and others and Scot and others on this panel, is because people trust that this money has value. Why do they trust that this money has value? Because it's secure. So if you have a staking coin that can be hacked, that can be attacked, then that security is no longer there, and that confidence is no longer there, and therefore the whole system collapses. So I remember in New York, there was an early consensus meeting, and Samson Mao, who's one of the founders of Blockstream, was on a similar panel to this, talking about proof of stake versus proof of work. And this was just really in the early days before mining became such a massive public company, private undertaking. And I was, as a layman, I'm not a computer scientist, but it just became so obvious to me that if you have something that from a cryptographic perspective is secure, and there's an intrinsic value because it costs you money to produce, right? If you remember how money was created, it started with gold. Why did it start with gold? Because it costs money to produce gold. So there has to be a value. If there's no value, there's no trust, then no one is here today. So we're all here today because we have trust, because there's value, and as far as I'm concerned, that settles the debate.
I'm glad you brought up the gold part of this, because this this is what we're doing here, right? We're bringing back a hard money system, and that's the whole point of this. The reason why everything has gone really wonky in our world is because easy money permeates through every crack within society. And historically, if you look back at, a gold money standard, you have a situation where, resources are highly centralized in different parts of the world. They're not necessarily equally accessible by different populations. And you have a situation where if you wanted to disturb that, or you wanted to improve upon your situation, you either had to make massive investments into those minings or possibly even go to war. In a proof of work system, we're actually changing that by leveling the playing field. Energy is available across the planet in all sorts of different forms and varieties. There's all sorts of different technologies that you can use to convert that energy and create wealth for everybody around the planet. And I think the real interesting thing here on the security part of it is just how difficult it actually is to scale a Bitcoin mining operation. When we're very early days in the Bitcoin mining network and you're talking about a couple of computers, it would have been pretty trivial to execute a 51% attack. There wouldn't have been an economic incentive really to do so because there was no real underlying value. But at this point in the game, for some country or military or corporation or individual to go out and say, I'm going to invest these resources, I'm going to create this kind of computational power, draw this amount of energy and do a 51% of the attack on the network is so implausible. That's what gives it strength, and that's what's going to continue to give it strength over time. And maybe Alex, you can talk a little bit about the geopolitical aspects of it and how that works across countries and the globe and everything else.
The one thing I wanted to touch on there in terms of the difficulty, like it does. There is energy. There's stranded energy that is useful for mining, and it's going to only that will largely become the only useful energy for mining over time. It is difficult though, like when we talk about democratizing the access to this type of technology and participation in a global monetary network, there are a lot of things that are huge bottlenecks and that have geopolitical implications. The access to chip foundries being probably number one, and it's not just mining. I mean, this has implications well beyond just for kind of human civilization, because we are becoming so reliable in the digital age on the things that create these digital processes. And so the barriers to entry are becoming higher, and the supply chains are becoming more and more brittle for the ability to participate in the network security model of Bitcoin, for the ability to participate in proof of work. And it's something that in some ways it is good because it is very unlikely that a single actor could obtain enough compute to have a credible attack on the network. But in some ways it creates areas where we need to be focusing, because we do have an incentive to continue to ensure that the health of the Bitcoin network remains through distribution. So and in a way, in jurisdictions that are not apt to try and control or corrupt them, jurisdictions that enjoy rule of law, frankly, North America is a good home for it. So there are significant geopolitical considerations, and people are starting to have those aha moments. We're seeing the CHIPS Act being passed. We're seeing Munchin's revision of the climate and infrastructure bill. So people are starting to think this way, but it's a consideration for proof of work going forward.
I think if I could comment very briefly, and I also want to hear from Ethan and Lurii on this topic, but I would argue that the incompetence of governments is what will help us to show that Bitcoin and other proof of work chains are what are going to outlast even the fiat system. Because look what happened with the US government and the Canadian government printing money like it wasn't worth anything. And now middle-class families cannot buy a home. So did that happen because governments mismanaged difficult situations, as they often do, not because they're ill-intentioned, but just because they don't have the tools? And I think what Bitcoin and the proof of work system does is give the globe tools to deal with value and exchange. So everyone in this room realizes that we do have a better system, and ultimately next year we'll see double the amount of people, and then the year after triple. So I'm encouraged about the work that we're all doing, and I'm confident that Bitcoin is the future.
And just to follow up to that, I mean, you're completely right with the printing of money and inflation, and I mean the last 10 years, the errors that have happened with financial engineering and what they've done to the economy as a whole is crazy. I love a lot of the DeFi guys, but it's scary when you think of what can happen with some of the tools that are coming out with DeFi and the lack of regulation there, and what they could do with proof of stake mechanisms. Again, nothing against anybody with DeFi, but you're literally, it's the Wild West out there, and you have access to as much money as you want, as quickly as you want, to do a variety of things. And in a proof of stake world, that's just not secure compared to proof of work whatsoever.
I'm going to jump back to a few of the things Alex mentioned there. So one of the reasons I love spending so much time in this space is because we are hyper-focused on the mining side, and I think that speaks to Bitcoin's level of importance in the governance aspect of it. It's rare that you see a staking network have conferences around running staking nodes or enthusiasts for that, right? You don't see articles saying, hey, that Russia just banned staking nodes, or there's 55% of staking nodes on Google Cloud. They really don't have that level of focus that we do on the decentralization of the network. We are hyper-focused on that. You see the Cambridge map of, where's this hash rate located, how much of it is in the hands of these pools, and everyone's very focused on that. Although, we're obviously all proof-of-work fans here, I think it is our duty to kind of continue to help that decentralization nature of it. Everything from going on-grid to off-grid, as well as different jurisdictional risks, as Alex mentioned. So, I think it's all on us here in the room today to continue to diversify your hash rate as much as possible. Deploy it in regions like Latin America, as BitFarms is doing. Deploy it off-grid like Scot's containers as well. So I think, that's a case for us, and to do homework for us all in the room here today.
Yeah, without mentioning names, Scott's point reminded me that some people invested in the Ethereum proof of stake network awaiting for the conversion, and they've had their money tied up for many years. And that's caused some financial stress and collapse of different companies. So be careful. Be careful with DeFi. Be careful with something that's not systematic and computerized and well conceived. I mean, we're a nascent industry. We need to establish credibility. And we do that through stability and transparency, and proof of work is what is the foundation of that. And without that, I don't think, we would be at $23,000.
Yeah, I think those are, solid points all around. The situation here that we have with the fiat monetary system is a situation where if you have all the money, you can create more money, right? And if you don't have any money, you can't create any money, right? And in proof of work, it's not that way. Proof of work is if you want to do the work, you can create money. And that's a resetting of the financial system. And so when you look at proof of stake systems, it's hard to see how that actually differs from the fiat monetary system that we have today. If you have money, you can create money, and you establish the rules for that money. And talking about how how difficult it would be to scale up an investment to get to a 51% attack in Bitcoin. There are so many real-world barriers in terms of, you said, the chips, in terms of the power, in terms of the containers, in terms of the locations that you're going to deploy, the labor, and everything else. On proof of stake, it's an infinite just change the number game, right? And so maybe we can talk a little bit about why proof of stake is not actually a viable alternative to proof of work. Because even though it does create a blockchain, that's not the problem that we're solving here with proof of work. Anyone want to take that?
Maybe let me explain. So yes, proof of stake might look like proof of work. It might do some steps which proof of work do, but still proof of stake doesn't solve the problem which proof of work solves. And proof of stake is flowed from the bottom to top. Unfortunately, proof of stake folks has developed a strategy which they use to mislead, confuse people, and misrepresent their solutions in such a way that some people are aware that there are some economic problems with incentives in proof of stake, but they might believe that proof of stake has good decentralization. Other people do know that everything is bad with decentralization in proof of stake, but they might think that proof of stake scales better. Other people might know that proof of stake is in fact doesn't scale, or it's scaled but not the thing which has to be scaled. And those people who know that, they might not aware about economic and incentives problems of proof of stake, and in general security problems of proof of stake. And it's very important for us to educate people and explain them that proof of stake doesn't work at all. And
Ethan, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, well, I'm going to take it a different direction here, and I've spoken to this a couple points. Being a mining pool operator, we're very focused on that layer of the ecosystem, obviously, in proof of work. And so when I look at proof of stake, I'm looking at the alternative, which is staking pools, which is a quite different landscape than we see in Bitcoin mining pools today. So staking pools and people operating these nodes are largely going to be exchanges, so the Krakens, the Coinbases of the world, because that's naturally where a lot of the coins are held. In that type of system, that's a permission system where as a user of that staking service, you're going to give over your coins to that staking pool provider. In the case that you disagree with how they're running their business or the governance of the network, you have to then request for them to give back your coins in order for you to go to another provider. In which case, maybe they're legally bound to say yes, but from a technology perspective, it's a permission system. That's very different from proof of work, where mining pools today do not control where you point your machine. If you have physical possession of your machine, you control your hash. And so if a mining pool is voting not in your favor for something like a Taproot or SegWit, it's very easy for you to go and reconfigure that machine to point at a different pool provider that you agree with. So I think there's certain layers in the proof of stake stack that still need to be worked out, and inherently will lead to kind of centralized permissioned behavior on the networks.
So beautiful, as always. The beauty of proof of work is in the technical details, and having people like Ethan. There's a lot of very technically minded people in this industry that understand the physics on the physical side and the physics on the software engineering side, and it's the nuanced way that these different layers interact. It's that inability to censor the control of the hash as a function of the structure of the mining pool ecosystem that is one of the most important parts of keeping this a permissionless system, right? But to understand that, you have to understand a pretty significant level of detail about the entire value chain of Bitcoin mining. It's incumbent upon us in this room and people like us to learn, and I'm obviously not very good at it yet, but to learn to dumb this down into really easy sound bites for people to understand the profundity of what we're doing as a congressional staffer that has 30 minutes to read a paper. So it's like, hey, we're creating a monetary system that can never be censored, and we're working on it. But that's the technical details are what is important here, and we need to dumb them down and communicate them non-technically, which I think it's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, and I would just add, I don't think I could articulate it as well as Ethan, but ultimately the fundamental genius of proof of work is how difficulty and profits play against each other to create an equilibrium, so that there's always an incentive to mine, because if people are mining at too expensive a rate, then those that can continue will keep the network going and receive more rewards. It's a complex thing to understand, but what I would add is not why proof of work is better than proof of stake, because as far as I'm concerned, that's clear. but how us as miners can respond to those who say, well, proof of work is deleterious to the environment. And I think we need to be able to be out front of that point and start as an industry self-regulating to encourage more and more thermal heat regeneration, more and more carbon credits, more and more ways that we can work in a sustainable economy. Obviously, BitFarms and ourselves, which are in Quebec, where you have hydroelectric power, which is totally sustainable, totally renewable. So, and bringing jobs and bringing prosperity to remote regions of the world where, you have mayors of cities saying, thank you, Bitcoin miner, for bringing jobs and employment in a sustainable context. And I think we need to work hard to make people understand that our intentions are positive, and we will do that. So thank you, everyone, for listening.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing here with proof of work and what we're talking about here on the energy side is that, you look at what is the definition of work kind of on a physical level. I mean, you measure it in joules, and this is the fundamental aspect of human society. We've been capturing sources of energy in different forms in order to live better lives for a long period of time, right? Whether that's burning wood or burning whale oil or coal and then crude and nat gas and nuclear. There's been a constant improvement on the sources of energy and the ability to extract work out of those and improve upon the conditions of human everywhere. This is the fundamental aspect of this. And I think with the easy money standard, we really got away from what's productive and what's efficient to what's cheap in the moment now and ignoring the long-term cost curve, right? If you have a short-term focus on a short-term time preference versus a long-term time preference, your investment strategies, your priorities are going to be very different. And Bitcoin is helping to bring that back, right? Bitcoin is helping people to remember that, hey, just because this might make money in 20 seconds doesn't actually mean that it has value, right? Bitcoin is inverting that old argument against itself and bringing us back to an old standard where work matters, where people going in and actually producing something matters. And I think that's really important here. I think people miss out on that. And I think we focus purely on this idea of, this thing will process this many transactions per second, and that's what's most important here. It's about the incentives, it's about the underlying fundamentals of what we're trying to restore here in the system and what's been broken about it. And I think that's where POW just really, really shines. Nobody else has been able to create a system that does that, right? And so, when we're looking at proof of work and proof of stake, really the only argument against proof of work, publicly is the environmental aspect of it, right? We all know that this fundamentally works on a technical level. We all know it processes transactions. We all know it's actually restoring financial sovereignty and ability to create wealth for people all over the world, whether you're setting up a container on a stranded gas field or a geothermal plant on an island somewhere in Tonga. You've got the ability to participate in this economic system. So this environmental aspect fighting against POW really is their last straw. They've tried with black markets, with Silk Road. They've tried with illicit funding of activities and money laundering, all these things, which have never borne out to be true by the data. I think the same thing is going to happen on the environmental side. It's not borne out by the data. And so maybe we could talk about this last-ditch effort that everybody has against POW, using the environmental hysteria, using this ESG, as a bludgeon against POW, trying to shut us down, and how miners are resisting this and powering through just by doing our work.
I want to go something interesting you were saying about the Bitcoin kind of inducing low time preference, avoiding malinvestment, and it is doing that. It is the roundabout way of going and making a lot of money is to do 10-year development projects and just enormous infrastructure projects. You don't make money immediately. In fact, you lose money for years and years and years and years before you start to ROI. That's like the definition of low time preference investing, right? It's doing that already, and it's doing that with significant headwinds from a regulatory perspective, whether it's enforcement through, regulation through enforcement, whether it's the threat of it, whether it's uncertainty that's disallowing access to certain types of credit for these long-term projects. It's doing that. Imagine when people actually understand that without Bitcoin mining, the energy transition will not happen. Once that is widely understood and the regulatory headwinds become regulatory tailwinds, this is going to fundamentally reshape our entire world, because it is going to enable that type of value-added investment at a global scale. Someone else can talk about the environmental stuff, or I'm happy to, but it will enable the energy transition. It will allow us to meet our climate goals, and it will allow us to do that in a way that enables access to reliable electricity and energy for everyone, in a way that we're about to see, sadly, in the European Union and specifically in Germany. We're about to see the results of malinvestment at the level of energy.
And I guess just a follow-up to that on energy and as a whole and the benefits of proof of stake with it. It's funny, you always hear people say the impact that Bitcoin miners have on the grid, and they don't often talk about the positive impact and having really, really large loads like some of these data centers we see in Texas that curtail when they need. It's almost like creating a reverse peaker plant. So instead of having to build a peak energy plant to deal with massive amounts of consumptions, they're using those underutilized resources, which basically turn a baseline plant into a peaker plant, which runs dramatically more efficiently than a peaker plant would. And it's something that's not often talked about, I find.
Yeah, I mean, Monbanc and Core Scientific, we both kind of made the pledge to be what you call guardians of the grid. So in the event of a downturn, we have both facilities in Texas. We can lend our network to sustain the electrical network because we have a load of 50, 100, 200 megawatts available in the event of a downtime. So, and we see such beautiful projects like solar and wind farms and even gas plants where they can decide whether they want to, if you're behind the meter, sell the energy onto the grid, mine Bitcoin, and it's just a beautiful integration between the production of energy and the production of money. And if we can add the third element of thermal heat regeneration, where we add agriculture to it, I think it's a sustainable system that will outlast the fiat system. You can mark my words today, as other even countries are trying to move to a digital standard clumsily, because governments are less competent than true software architects. We are living in a society where we're governed by software. We're not governed by as much regulation as we thought, because if we can trust and have a consensus over good software, then, in a way, society can become more fair. And that's what we want. We want someone in Latin America who wants to be able to support his family to plug in an S9, because in Venezuela the power is at 1 cent and they're generating $10 a day, with their S9 to be able to support their family. Or energy companies, instead of doing an aluminum smelter plant that's dumping dioxide, there's doing a 50 megawatt mine that's generating revenue and supporting shareholders and bringing jobs. So I think we're on the right side of the fence, and I'm proud to be a miner.
So, well, I think the Bitcoin network is resistant to single government's regulation. It's also important not for us to be policy takers here, and I think Alex and some of the others will talk about this on their next panel. We just saw one of the biggest migrations due to regulation happen in May of last year with the Chinese mining ban. And I think in this current ESG wave that's happening today in mostly the Western world, it's really important that we don't let that happen to us. North America is still one of the best jurisdictions to mine in terms of rule of law and other reasons. And so in this current kind of attack vector on Bitcoin, I think it's on us here and again in the room to kind of push back against that as much as possible. So defending it, obviously, we have a lot of really great talking points across the industry. Sometimes it gets caught in an echo chamber like the one here today, and so it's really important that we go out to people who aren't already involved in mining, aren't already believers in Bitcoin, and really get that word out there. So yeah, encourage everyone not to just take the policy and really let's go make policy on Capitol Hill. It's really important that miners don't get treated unfairly in terms of which energy sources they can use. We need to be treated as every other consumer of energy, and so make sure you're going out to your local politicians, your local normie friends, and orange pilling them.
Bringing up the China mining ban is an important thing here, because this was likely the greatest test that the Bitcoin network has ever faced, possibly the greatest test that Bitcoin network will ever face. I mean, we had a situation here where almost overnight, 60% of the network went offline. How many transactions didn't get processed? How many blocks didn't get processed?
None.
The thing worked. 60% of capacity goes offline and everything still moves. This is the point. This is the proof. This thing works. And what happens over time? People move their investment, they move their resources, they move their assets, and they redeploy them in new locations. We're now at a situation where the network hash rate is, roughly where it was prior to the China mining ban a year ago, right? What other industry could reallocate their assets within 12 months and restore complete, full performance?
And significantly lower emissions intensity.
And significantly lower emissions intensity. Thank you, Alex. I forgot about that one. The situation here is, look, we have infinite proof, really, that the system has worked. There's not a single piece of evidence that says the system doesn't work. So really now it's about education and getting out to people, like Alex is talking about, and letting people understand. And there's a severe dearth of knowledge here that needs to be filled, and it's only going to come from passionate, intelligent people, who are out there telling their stories. And there's countless real-world examples of POW being implemented into people's businesses, into people's lives, into countries, and to develop those resources and to address inefficiencies and increase profitability. And whether that's through containers systems, or through warehouse style systems, or even through like merge mining like Jax is doing, there's all sorts of stuff there that we can do. Maybe we can talk a little bit about some of these real world examples of how POW is being integrated into business models in order to address these inefficiencies that may have existed, partly due to regulation, partly due to inefficient markets. But how is POW actually being integrated directly into business models?
Well, you see countries in Latin America, El Salvador being one of them, saying we don't want to subject our population to a currency that we can't promise that you could buy a loaf of bread with your wages. So they're saying we actually have more trust in Bitcoin as a means of exchange, which is based on proof of work, than the real or the peso or the other coin that have caused so much hardship and suffering in not only Latin America, but in many countries in Africa, where the price of Bitcoin is more than the market value. We know that. We know that the price of Bitcoin in some African countries is more than what it's trading at, because people trust it and they're able to trade. If I wanted to send money to my family in Russia, I could do it quicker through the Bitcoin network than I can through a wire, where a fax has to be sent, a tree has to be cut down for that fax, and somebody has to be hired, spend some gas, go to their office, be there from 9 to 5. This is a better system, and people know that. And maybe it'll take 10 years or 20 years before it becomes the standard, but it's coming.
Power systems, the global power system has been very inefficient because it's been impossible up till now to execute global energy arbitrage. Proof of work is allowing for truly global energy arbitrage. And very large companies are thinking very interesting thoughts about monetizing megawatt hours and optimizing their utility. And it's enabled by proof of work. That's what's it's going to change. It's going to change our global energy system, and it's at the generation, transmission, and distribution levels, and it's really exciting.
I think the energy arbitrage thing is really important here. And I don't think there are very many Bitcoin miners who aren't playing in this field to some extent. Even for companies like BitFarms, we operate primarily in Quebec. They have tremendous amounts of these hydroelectric dams that they built up for this heavy industry, which is now gone, and there's limited ability to export that electricity to another market. Even if you do have close proximity, even if you do have the resources to develop those technologies, sometimes you don't even have the political will to finalize these projects, and they can take years, where Bitcoin mining come in here in a much shorter amount of time, monetize these assets, minimize the waste, and enable greater profitability and economic prosperity for everybody. We're seeing it in places like Alberta too, where the ability for them to export their gas has been incredibly limited. They're using Bitcoin mining as a way to export the value of that natural gas to another market and get even a higher value, per unit of energy. This is an amazing technology. We're seeing it in Venezuela, where people in Venezuela have had no ability to generate any sort of reasonable amount of income, but the energy is so incredibly cheap that they're able to sell that energy to an international marketplace through Bitcoin mining. And this is probably the only thing that has kept Caracas alive, is the ability for people within Venezuela to take advantage of this really the world's cheapest energy and sell it to an international marketplace in order to sustain their lives.
And even just a follow up to that on the energy play, circling back to the environmental aspect of it, the benefits of using it for flare mitigation. I mean, we can't get away with it in Alberta, but you go down in Texas, they just burn the gas off, which is awful for the environment, awful for the ozone layer. Using Bitcoin and blockchain as a means for flare mitigation, not only to monetize that, but also to reverse some of the impacts that are happening to the environment as a result, is a major benefit of proof of work.
The incentive on flare gas is very powerful, because proof of work is actually the only incentive that exists in order to reduce your flare gas emissions. It's the only one exists, right? There's a reason why it's flared in the first place, right? Because there's no other way to deal with it. And governments haven't figured out a way to incentivize a reduction. They've just figured out a way to tax your emissions, right? So they can increase your cost, but they can't incentivize your reduction. And this is something that proof of work is doing and on a large scale. It's happening all over the United States. And you look at how much potential flare gas there is. I mean, this is so much power, and it's so much that's wasted. This is a fantastic way that Bitcoin mining is being integrated into these business models to improve their economics, reduce their waste, and improve the environmental impact of their operations for everybody around the country.
And the beauty of it, even though that it's let's call it free energy, there still is a barrier to entry. You can't just go take that free energy and all of a sudden have this impact on proof of work. You still need to spend considerable resources to build a farm, to mine that, or to convert the gas to energy and then mine it. So it's not like, circling back to proof of stake, it's not like you found some magic key for free energy and all of a sudden you can start to manipulate the blockchain. There's still significant barriers of entry to get in there as well.
Yeah, I think the barriers to entry here is very, very key for everybody here in proof of work. And you look around the room, look at all these different providers, all these different manufacturers, all these different people who are offering you some sort of service or technology in order to help you overcome those barriers and participate in this industry. Nothing's free, right? Everything here costs some amount of money, costs some amount of investment in time, resources, and everything else. And you're getting a value out of it. Nobody's in here, for free and dreams, right? And this is the real key here. We only got about a minute left, so maybe if we want to wrap up with some closing thoughts on the beauty of POW.
I really don't think we have the luxury of getting on our back foot here and being apologetic for our energy usage. energy usage is highly correlated with human civilization, and so we should all be striving to consume more energy. And as soon as we're apologetic for that, I think the fight's over. So let's go plug in more hash.
Yeah. You know, proof of work is taking power away from governments and bringing it to the people. And when you bring power to the people, that's when you have success and fairness and wealth and prosperity. So I'm proud to be part of the Proof of Work network and support the Bitcoin network.
Let me also add one point that yes, environmental problem and carbon dioxide emission is called the last argument of the proof of stake, because they throw it when they have no other arguments. And what we can answer here is we can point to traditional system in which printing money is free. And it's not our ideal, and that's not what should go forward to. It's the past, and the proof of stake is actually moving us to the past, in where at the time where printing money was free, as like adding some digit in the database. However, I also want to point that this environmental problem is not the only argument which actually proof of stake through, and there is another argument is like called scalability. And if we already know that proof of stake projects, they often claim that they not only make environmentally friendly solutions according to their claims, but they also build scalable solutions. But again, we can refer to the classical central bank system, in which centralized databases, cloud databases, can also process thousands of transactions and have very high throughput. And actually what proof of stake systems do in their building just the same solutions. But throughput is not the only thing which is matter. What matters is actually the quality of that throughput, the quality of the financial service which is provided. And the financial service which is provided by proof of work systems is very different from the financial services which are provided by centralized systems and proof of stake. So what they do, they scale this very low quality financial service in which there is a central authority which can control your money. Proof of work provides a service which is level up, where there is no central authority. And that's what true scalability means, is to provide this high quality financial service to the larger amount of people. And proof of stake is failing to do that.
I'll be really quick because I know we're over time. I mean, it just works. We don't need to prove anything. It proves itself.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Go plug in some miners and secure the future economy for yourself and everyone else.